Oh,
sorry. Are you able to share, or do I have to give you the host? Okay, great.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so hello everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining this presentation. Yeah, great to have you all here. And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on wherever you guys are living right now. And really appreciate taking your time here and joining this. So Chang already gave a fair bit of presentation, introduction about myself, but the narrative that I had crafted, I think there's some echo.
Is there? Or maybe I should just mute.
Oh, okay, nice. So Chang already has given a fair bit of introduction about myself, but so the way I've crafted this slide is that I just want to show how you can seep into the blockchain field in case you're planning that. And so my background from way early on is in mechanical engineering, which is completely unrelated to crypto, blockchain, whatever. And then after that, I did my master in supply chain management, again, completely off the track, like there's no relation. But as you can see, like I was all over the place. Like I was trying to find out what can I do? Like where can I find something I like? And by 2019, I was trying to like make my thesis for the master's. And then I was introduced to Blockchain Graduate Pathway, which I'm very grateful for. And they got me really trained into Ethereum, making smart contracts and all those things. And not only the technical part, but also the business perspectives and all those things. And I used that to make my thesis on supply chain finance through a blockchain lens. If you guys are interested, you can read that through. It's on the UBC library as well. So what I did there was just create a bunch of smart contracts that could interact with each other and facilitate reverse securitization, invoice financing, purchase order financing, all those things on Ethereum. But the code I wrote was an absolute disaster. Like I'll be honest. If you go out, try a transaction on that, probably cost you hundreds of dollars on gas fee. But that's off track. Today present, I am a PM at Covalent, and I'll talk in detail about like what I actually do. But the main reason I'm sharing this slide right now is that if you're having doubts, if you're planning that, oh, I really don't know what tech about blockchain, crypto, this space is very welcoming. There's like any other emerging tech out there, like AI or anything. The best thing about all these new technologies that they're very welcoming. Doesn't matter where you're from. If you're a lawyer, you can still work in a crypto space, given you can be like a lawyer for a crypto firm and maybe fighting their case with the government, something like that. So there are always place that you can find your role in. So without delaying too much, I'll just talk about like how I divided the content of the slides. So I'll start by making a case for Web3. I'm including this because I'm not sure the audience that I'm referring to here. There could be actually people who already are very familiar with Web3 and they're actually using it for their own projects right now in the listeners. But I'll just try to keep it very general. And so I'll talk about like what is Web3, why do we need Web3, like why do we need this transition, and then what's actually happening in the industry, like what's cooking, like from the industry perspective, like what am I seeing working with all these projects who are at the production level, and then where does Covalent fit, like what's our job in this entire chaos, and this what is actually the one unified API for which I manage the product, and how you can use it if you are planning to make a project which needs blockchain data. And then I'll then just simply transition into like where the future is headed, what is the future of Covalent as a network, and what is the future of space that I see working in the industry. And then I'll conclude as like briefly with my role as a PM, the opportunities you can get at Covalent, and I will just do some QA. So I assume I really don't need to present this thing here, that crypto adoption is at upswing. We've been noticing this for a while now. And recently after COVID hit, the huge inflow of the money from Fed, you can see the prices just going crazy and extreme volatility in the market. Everything's reaching all-time high and dropping and all that thing. But all that thing aside, if you see in this small section at the bottom, Bitcoin is just crossing the chasm of early adopters. The blockchain, crypto, everything's just crossing that small chasm of the early adopters and going to early majority. So we are all still very early. And if you're planning to enter the space right now, you're not late. If you're planning to make a project, do some research on the blockchain right now, using crypto for some kind of use case that you're planning, or if you imagine that there is some way that you can use crypto for your academic research, publish papers, you're still very early in the space. So you can have genuine contribution in the field. So just presenting a case there. And I surely imagine that by 2025, in just 1 or 4 years, there'll be millions of pieces of information on all these public blockchains. My entire presentation is in the domain of public blockchains. I'm not talking about Hyperledger at all here right now. There'll be dozens of use cases of blockchains that we cannot even imagine. Just think from the perspective that when Facebook and Google started, no one could imagine that internet would turn out here, considering how it began in the late 80s and the early 70s and all that part. And soon you can imagine thousands and thousands of dApps will be powering our lives, and there already are, and we don't even know, because a lot of mainstream companies like Reddit, GitHub, Discord, all these companies are trying to get into blockchains right now because they don't want to have the FOMO. They want to capture the early audience. And there will be at least 1 billion users on blockchain by 2025 that we imagine, because the adoption has been insane. If you look at the transactions, because what we do is that when we talk to blockchains, when we index them, we actually also give them a lot of data about their performance over years. And then when we created those charts, we found out that the transactions on those blockchains, the usage of those blockchains in simple terms has been growing at an exponential pace. Like nothing like this has been witnessed in any other technology in past few years. So this is still an understated number in my perspective, 1 billion. So before we actually understand like what is API, what is all that, what is Web3, I'll just slice how I, as an industry insider, see the ecosystem and how we all refer to ecosystem in the industry. So we have something called as layer 0, which is the regulators and the people who actually make things, who make stuff. These people contribute to the GDP. They actually sit, ideate things and create blockchain network, create applications. So we refer to these things, the foundation, which also you guys in the future as well, I suppose, will be the layer 0, the backbone of anything. And then you get the blockchains, which is the layer 1. So Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Near, all these are layer 1 blockchains. They're all separate blockchain networks. So we call them layer 1s. And they can interact with each other, but there are tech that like Rainbow, like bridges and all those things that I will not go deep into right now. And then of that, we have layer 2. For example, Polygon is a layer 2 solution for Ethereum to scale its transactions. Aurora is an EVM layer 2 solution for Near to scale its transactions and provide EVM compatibility. So these are layer 2s. That's how we see the ecosystem. It is important to understand this thing first before you understand Web3, because layer 1 and layer 2 is where Web3 lives. On the layer 1, if you create dApp, on layer 2, if you create a dApp, to access the data of that particular application, you need the Web3 libraries and calls and all those things. So what is Web3? It's been a pretty buzzword right now. A few days ago, there's a crypto hearing in front of the Senate, in front of Congress in America, and I was quite surprised, to be honest, to know regulators asking questions like what is Web3 to a crypto expert, because you don't expect them to go and ensure such genuine interest in this field, because they're not asking that what is Bitcoin now. The conversation, the narrative has changed. Now they're going to like, what is Web3? What is building on here right now? So the way the presenter the guy who was presenting in front of all these Congress people, he told that to understand Web3, understand internet and web. So when the internet started, it was called as ARPANET and all those history that we already know about. But that laid the foundation of TCP/IP, or all these protocols that we use today to establish networks, to talk to each other, right? But then web is actually a bit different than internet. So web is just like one of the face of internet. Like we access web through protocols laid down in internet. That's the web is an idea. So when we had the web 1, there were just like standard sites, just like blogs and all, like static web pages, very, very rudimentary. And when the internet was started, when the ARPANET happened, it was the connections were happening between few trusted universities and government. So they all knew each other. They're like a dozen networks, a dozen nodes on this network. So they didn't really need the trusting layer, which today is blockchain. They didn't really require it. There was no reason to have it. But then there was mainstream adoption of web in terms of Web 2, where they also had the right layer on the blog on the web. Now you can interact, you can hit HTML and all those things. Now you can interact with the web. You can create web pages. There are web browsers, email, and all those things. Everything was having their own protocols laid down in the internet. So how did we arrive to Web3? That is the question. Like, why do we need Web3? So the things that we found out that the major influence of web was being dominated by a bunch of companies who were deciding everything, like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, all these things. They had the major influence on this. And then you had all these scandals in the past, and now you had the need to have the trust solution. Like, you cannot trust anyone. The only thing you can trust is Web3, and blockchain provided that. So this term was coined by one of the guy who invented Ethereum and is now the founder of Polkadot. So he coined this term Web3 because you can now tokenize economy, have the ownership of your own data, and interact with blockchain and use this new frontier of web. So what kind of applications can you use, can you make on Web3? The first thing, Uniswap. So this category of application like Uniswap, Aave, DYDX, these are all financial applications. So Uniswap is like an exchange which happens decentralized. So today, if you trade on stocks, you sell things, you buy things, and entire settlement happens in a completely in a custodial way. You put your stocks somewhere else, and it's in the custody of someone else. Uniswap makes that non-custodial. So you have the custody of your entire assets. So you go to this thing called Uniswap, you have 2 tokens, you give 1 token, you get another token. It's as easy as that. Then you have this new frontier of lending called as Aave. So what you can do is that you can provide some liquidity and all those things, but you can provide them some things as a collateral of tokens you have, and you can borrow some that from that. And the application that you can get from this, because now you don't have to show your credit. If you have enough tokens to provide collateral, you can get it instantly from that. So just the thing that you're doing is you're getting rid of intermediaries one by one, and just making things extremely easier for the end user to access the entire fund that was not possible for them before. And then you get things called as GameFi, or that before you were paying for games. And now if you have things like Axie Infinity and all these new Sandbox and Fractal, all these new games coming on, you get paid to play these games. And this is totally revolutionary if you think about it, because there is a research done on Axie Infinity, which shows that players of this game in countries in Asia like Vietnam or Indonesia are earning more money playing games on Axie Infinity than their normal wage. And this was never thought of. So this is just a start of getting the applications that you never imagined could happen with Web 2. And then you get all these things called as DAOs, which is decentralized autonomous organization. So you get every single exchange, for example, Uniswap, or whether it be Aave or SushiSwap, all these decentralized exchange have their own DAOs. So you can vote on things, you can ask them to do stuff. So whenever there's a proposal created, if we hold their coins, you can vote, you can raise your voice, you belong to the community, you have new identity, you can associate yourself to certain companies now. And that is not really possible. I'll give an example from our own experience. So we also have our own tokens. We also create proposals and ask community to create proposals, and we do voting on them. Internally for our company, sometimes it's not profitable to do things, but if community wants them to do, you have to do them. For example, adding a blockchain called as Harmony. So we had recently had a proposal and it went through. Now imagine that, for example, if Harmony was not profitable for us to add, but if community voted on that, we still have to do it, because now they enforce that using the tokens on you. Things like these, like things like having community voice laid on you, was not possible before. So all these three things that I'm mentioning here right now are core to Web3 right now, because I truly believe that you can provide value through things which are not possible by using Web 2. The same thing, if you cannot do with Web 2, is clearly a value addition of Web 3. It's as easy as that. So there is limitless data getting on the blockchain right now because of all these new applications, and they all need to talk to each other. There's like a very essential need for all these applications to get data from one of these apps and feed into other and all those things. And it's kind of hard to do. I don't know if you have noticed nowadays that if you create you can send a message from Messenger to Instagram and vice versa, which is not possible before the acquisition of Instagram by Facebook or Meta, as we call it today. The way this can happen right now, because after acquiring Instagram, Facebook would now tap into their database and all those things legally and get the data and create that interoperability. In blockchain, that is inbuilt, that is inherent. To have that kind of interoperability, you need to like do acquisition, all those sort of things. The data is out there. The trick is how to get it. And that's where Colon provides the value to how to actually get that blockchain data, to how to actually make things interoperable. So blockchain data is limitless and it's going to keep increasing. Transactions will keep happening, and then new data will keep getting added, and the problem will persist. So data is very disorganized. All the data on the blockchain right now, although it's public, and people think that, oh, why can't I just get it if it's public? The actual issue is like it's very hard to get. You need to know a fair bit of networking, database technologies, and all those things to actually get it. You have to set up your own node. You have to make this node in consensus with the entire network, and after that, you can tap the blockchain data out by making like very technical RPC calls and all those sort of things. And after even that, the data is disorganized because everyone just publishes data on the blockchain, and it happens in form of transactions and log events and all those things. Not everything is organized in the way that not every log event in the transaction is decoded. Not everything is the way it's supposed to be, because anyone can be part of this. So it's hard to imply the standards. And it's very difficult to store, obviously. We actually host a Binance Smart Chain node right now, and it is causing us so much trouble to store it, even though we have a bunch of dedicated team tackling this specific problem, that how to actually store this data, because it's just getting exposure exponentially high to difficult to store it, because the new things keep getting added. And that's when we get the Colon API into use. So it's just one solution to access all the on-chain data. It's like single unified API. It's queryable from anywhere, from your web browser right now. You don't need a code, you don't need anything. And it enables multi-chain in seconds. So how does the network works? Like, how do we actually make this happen? So we have all these blockchains that you can see on the left here, which is Ethereum, Binance, Near, Avalanche, and Moonbeam. And we run nodes for all of them. And then we try to maintain the highest uptime, and we stay 2 blocks behind to prevent all those weird problems with the uncle blocks. And then we index everything stored in a database. And then we put SQL transformation on top of it, and then expose them through APIs. So, and we divided the APIs into 3 parts. The first is class A, and then class B, and then class C. So class A are very generic APIs. So using something as small as you change the chain ID. For example, chain ID of Ethereum is 1, chain ID of BSC is 56, or Binance Smart Chain is 56. So you change the chain ID, and then you get data of different blockchain. As easy as that. There's no code required. So class A contains a family of all the generic endpoints. Class B is protocol-specific endpoints. For example, Uniswap, Aave that I recently talked about. To get the data of those specific endpoints on multiple blockchains, that comes in class B. And then you get 0x and Balancer. These are all protocols that live on these blockchains. And then class C endpoints that we're building right now, and I'll talk about more in later. So we actually imagine that this entire space is getting so huge, and new blockchains are coming or getting indexed or like getting rolled out every single day, and there are new applications coming in. But beyond all this, beyond even actually imagining to start your own product, to start something that you want to create, the first thing that you want to do is that to interact with blockchain, you create your own wallet. To interact with blockchain, the first thing you do is like you have a public address. And then when you start trying to make transactions on all these different applications, you get a bunch of tokens. So I'll walk through an example of how to get the token balances of an address using the OneUnified API. This is our most famous API. So I'll lay down the problem for you in the simplest way possible so that anyone can understand it. So the first image you see here for expectation and reality shows how data of how much token is belonging to any specific user, any specific address. How's that stored on blockchain or Ethereum? So we imagine that because Ethereum works on account and balance system, so there should be like some kind of way that you go to Ethereum and say, oh, please give me all the tokens of account A, and it should just appear. But the trick is that it's not actually work like that. So Ethereum as a blockchain contains a bunch of smart contracts deployed on it. And each of these smart contracts contains data of token A, token B, token C. So token A belongs to a specific smart contract, and that smart contract contains how much of token A is in wallet A, how much of token A is in wallet B, how much of token A is in wallet C. So the data is stored in silos in all these smart contracts. So you need to have a holistic view of the system so you can get this entire data of all the tokens that belongs to wallet 1. So the way it is fragmented is very different, and it is very unintuitive. So how can you do it? The problem even gets worse when you look at the small equation in the bottom, which is like just NC2, a fancy way of writing n into n minus 1 upon 2. So if you guys remember, I talked about Uniswap and all these exchanges. The way these things work is that you can do 2 things on these places. The first is that you can swap one token for another. So you have token A, you provide the token A to the smart contract, and you get token B for certain value. The second way this thing works is, the second thing you can do on Uniswap is provide liquidity. So you can give both token A and token B to a pool. And then whenever anyone on that, whenever a different person comes to that pool and swap token A for token B, you get some portion of the fees for that swap. So you provide the liquidity to that pool. So there are two things you can do. So when you provide the liquidity to any of these pools on Uniswap, what actually happens to keep how much of the liquidity you have provided? They give you something called as an LP token, a liquidity provider token. And this token is very crucial. But the weird thing is that there is no smart contract deployed for this token right now. It is programmatically generated. And all these tokens are also ERC20s, one of the standards that we know of. When you count these tokens inside as well, if a user is interested in know the balance of these tokens as well, so the number of tokens that you might be interested in suddenly goes from 10 or 12 to 100,000. And this is such an interesting problem to have, because any application, any research that you're planning to do in the future, the first thing they will require to know how actually I can get the tokens of an address. Such a simple solution to ask. Sorry, some simple question to ask. So the options you have to answer this question is, the first thing you can do is set up an in-house node that I talked about already. Hire a bunch of network engineers, hire a bunch of database engineers, and set up a node in-house. And whenever you want the question, to answer this question, you actually make Web3 calls to these nodes for each specific 100,000 smart contract. And you should keep track of every single smart contract that you're concerned with. Second thing you can do is use something called as third-party node providers, which is they will host the node for you. You don't have to have that network engineer and all those things. They'll host the node for you. And then you just make the smart contract so you just make the RPC call, the Web3 call to these third-party nodes. And this is actually being used by MetaMask. That's what they do. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but every time you wanna add an additional token to MetaMask, you have to add that manually. You cannot do it by yourself. So you copy the contract address and you add that to MetaMask. That's what happens. The third thing is creating subgraphs. So what you do is that you, for this particular single contract, you create something called a subgraph, which is like a very technical term in this protocol called as the graph. But it is exactly the same problem that is here. You cannot get in just one call your entire balance, how much money you hold. You have to the first thing you have to do in every single case, you have to find out every single time what are all the tokens I hold manually, which is just not feasible logically, considering how fast this space is going. And the reason this is happening, this entire thing, because there has been so much development, so much research on how to make blockchains faster, how to make blockchains more optimal, and all those things, but they're not really paying attention to a crucial thing, how to read data from the blockchain at scale. The right layer of the blockchain, how to write data on the blockchain, is scaling at a tremendous pace. No doubt about that. But Solana and all those things, being able to create 250,000 transactions per second, even more than Visa right now. So we already have crossed that blocker. But still, we cannot use that because we cannot read blockchain data that efficiently. And how do we solve this? Is using this one thing. So there's a small API call here. If you just click this, you can actually get the token balances of my address. That is literally it. And this is such an easy solution because you don't have to worry about anything. So this is my entire, so this is one of the dummy address that I use. And this is all the tokens that I hold. This entire thing, you actually might spend 1 or 2 or 3 months doing. I'll share the slides with you as well, so you don't have to worry about it. But this one simple HTTP API call to our web server will give you that data instead of you. And now, since this crucial problem is solved, if you're trying to make a startup, if you're trying to design a product, if you're trying to visualize something, you can put a resources creating your competitive advantage, creating the protocol instead of working on these basic problems, which are really not that much of concern. So I'll break down how the API works. So we have the simple URL, which is like an HTTPS call to go to kuberneteshq.com. And you have the version 1 of the API. 137 is actually the chain ID of Matic network. So if you're gonna go from Matic to Ethereum, you change this 137 to 1, and you are now on Ethereum. And then you have the address. So address is this thing, this address belongs to me. And this balances V2 is the type of API call you're making and the key, API key that you use, that you get when you sign up. So it is incredible what you can achieve with just like one few lines of code on your web browser, and you can get your entire token balance. And because this particular solution is so efficient, I think in few days, we actually might see MetaMask using us as well, because they can clearly see this is not working out for them, the method they're employing it right now. So a small exercise here to set up your own Web3 wallet and go through it. I'll share it for you as well. You don't have to go it right now. What I'm working on is why we created this API, like who our market. So our market is categorized into two people, analysts and crypto devs. The market size, use cases, that's all pretty obvious. It's gonna, the number is gonna improve as we speak. The use case is gonna add up as we progress through the time. The key is analyst here as well, instead of crypto developers. Crypto devs want the easiest solution for sure, but analysts cannot really do all those critical things. If you guys are doing research, if you guys are being the analyst, you cannot actually focus on all the key aspect of setting up node and all those things. You want an easiest solution. So if you go to our API docs, which I'll show you later on if we have time, we also have analyst mode. If you wanna analyze the blockchain data just through the web browser, you can do that right through your Google Chrome or Brave or whatever you're using. And that is just making things extremely easy for research, because we should acknowledge that it's not all about industry, but about research as well, because you can get so many insights by doing the data analytics from crypto and earn a decent amount of money from that as well. And that is usually people don't talk about. And because the APIs we provide are so strong, the one unified API is so efficient, and that is why it's being used by the top dApps in the industry right now. For example, Zerion uses it, Rainbow uses, NFTX uses. All these apps uses to not only get all the token balances, but their transactions, their log events, and the NFT data and all those things. And all of those things you can get through just one single API call. I really want to talk about like why we are able to do it and no one else in the space right now. Like what is so different about our stack, about our architecture. So the approach that we use is ELT and not ETL. And these are just database paradigms. So ETL stands for extract, transformation, and load. And ELT stands for extract, load, and transformation. In the exact order, you do these steps. So extract means that you set up a node and you extract all the blockchain data. And then you get transformation or transform. When you transform the data in the schema, in the rows and columns that you would like. And then load is you feed that into some kind of database, and now it can be used by you. Versus extract, load, and transform that we use, in which we extract every single log event, every single transaction with a deep crawl. And we load the entire data without doing any sort of tweaks and transformations on it, entire data into a Postgres, into a database. And on top of that, you have this super optimized SQL queries, which give you these efficient API called as one different API. So the difference between ELT and ETL is that first thing is you can only visualize the data, what the data can see. You can only visualize that what the data can see. And by this, what I mean that when you extract the data, when you do this transformation and filter out some of the data, you can never visualize what you never stored. That is the first problem. That's why subgraphs cannot give you data of all the token balances, because they do not store data of all the tokens. So that is the crux of the problem. And then you have something called as ease of automation and transformation strength. So because it's ELT, you can templatize things. You can automate stuff. And the reason you can do this because since you're transforming anything, and if an error happens, you can run the data again. You can just fix that thing and just run the data through transformation and get the output. But in opposite to that, in ETL, that is just not possible. And it's very hard to create templates using ETL approach. Let me give an example that a few days ago, we had a request that one of our community member wanted to add this particular exchange like Uniswap called as Trader Joe. Yeah, don't worry about the name. So it's called as Trader Joe. So they came to us like, we want to add this particular exchange to your API and get the data. If you're trying a different approach like the one I shared before in the options slide, it will take you days to actually get that data. For us, it was 2 hours. The guy came to us, we already had a template to actually how to provide that data. We ran that requirement, the factory contract address, the router address, and the swap fee, all those key ingredients through our transformation. And with the next deployment of our backend, it was available. So it is as easy as that. If you can templatize repetitions, and then acknowledging that do only what you're good at. So the way ETL works right now is that you need to know certain languages to actually access the ETL things. For example, if you use a subgraph, so you need to know JavaScript and GraphQL. But ELT, it's not really important. All you need to create this transformation is just SQL. And that is the first language that you would use if you're trying to learn database and all those sort of things. So CryptoServe as an essential backbone as a data layer, and Colon provides all the data through these one unified APIs. And I would really like to talk about like what the future entails, where this entire crypto space is going right now. What are we going to do in future? And whereas the crypto as an entire space is heading to the future that I'm observing nowadays. So the first initiative that we are doing is called as Class C endpoints. So you might have noticed that when I got this entire response from my API call, I got every single things, and where it might contain data which I might not need. And I might actually have some requirements, for example, pivoting the data and sorting the data and all those things. And I cannot do that here. So using Class C endpoints, using Primer, there is one of the language that we are building. And I think we also have a bunch of people from UBC cohort as well who are helping us build this in the team right now. You can match, sort, skip, group, pivot, do all those sort of things on the API call itself, and then get the data in the format that you want. And yeah, I'm really glad that UBC also has helped us in this perspective. We have Fatima and a bunch of other people helping us build this thing, and it's going to be revolutionary. So yeah, if you're more interested about that particular thing, you should probably talk to her. And then I want to take some time to talk about like what is CQT, what is Colon as a network, because as you might already have noticed from the tech stack, that we are pretty centralized. Like we have very specific solution to the problem, but we do everything. There is no network of Colon nodes right now being operated, and that's exactly what we are headed as a roadmap. So we have our own token called as CQT or Colon query token. And right now, you can use it for governance, but in the future, this will be also the currency of the network that we're building, which I'll go right now to talk about. So we have 4 nodes that we are planning to release in the coming few years. That will be block specimen producer, indexer, query operator, and delegators, or processor nodes. So the way this will happen is that block specimen producer will produce the proof of the blockchain data and publish it back to the blockchain. It's pretty technical. So I will not go deep into like what exactly all the nodes do, but to understand it in the simplest manner, let's go back to the ELT paradigm that we talked about. So block specimen producer extracts the data. Indexer indexes the data and then loads it to storage nodes, and query nodes provide the transformation layer, and you can query the transform data. So what will happen in the future is that right now the API is free to use. If you guys are trying to use or get the blockchain data, it is free to get from Covalent. But in future, what will happen is that when we set up the node to make it more reliable, to make the data more accessible to everyone, when the Covalent gets decentralized in the future, what will happen is that the developers or the analyst will make API calls, and they will have to pay using stable coins or USDC or USDT. This stable coin will go to one of the decentralized exchange like Uniswap or something like that. It will be swapped for the stable coin to CQT. So we'll buy CQT for this stable coin, and this CQT will be paid to all these node providers in the future. So that's how the node will operate in the future. The detailed description is in the next slide. I really don't want to go into that because I want to take more time about question and answers. But this is what I see in the future is the market opportunity that you have if you're trying to start a company or planning to start a new research. That DeFi has just crossed $100 billion, NFT has just crossed $10 billion, and the growth is exponential for sure. But it's crucial to realize that if you're trying to do anything, and I'll go back full circle, that the first thing that you will need to do is access the blockchain data. It will be extremely hard to do the entire thing by yourself, and you will always need to look for the solutions. Covalent can provide the exact solution you need through a unified API with matter of one click. And my role as a PM in this entire chaos, in this entire thing that we're doing, is I talk to people, I get the requirements on from them. I see like what people actually want to build, what kind of data they need, probably you guys as well, what kind of data you guys need. You can talk to me anytime, approach me on LinkedIn, anywhere, send me an email. Then I create the prioritization. I talk to the API team, I create sprints with them. I create, oh, this is what we need. This is what we got to build. This is what the exact thing that people need. And then I plan the entire shipping of it with the API team, from building it to the vision document, everything, to marketing it. And in the end, with great people like Fatima and probably more people that will get onboarded from ABC in near future, we'll actually be able to publish this unified APIs used heavily by all the top tabs right now, like Rainbow, Uniswap, every single app in the space. I can only see that we got 10 minutes for Q&A. So I don't know if that works for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eleni, for the wonderful presentation. And I think the information that you provided here will be very, very, very valuable for some of the audience here, because I see that we have a number of researchers in our audience, and I think researchers will need the data that is provided by Covalent to conduct in-depth research into the blockchain space. And also you shared with us some of the insights into the future, and provided us with some suggestions in terms of how to develop a blockchain applications, what will be the cautions. And I think all of those suggestions will be very useful for the audience. So I see that we have a couple of comments and questions in the chat. So can we see the comments and questions in the chat, Andy?
Sure. I think the first comment is by Gregory, saying that this is totally evolution. Doesn't it create new dependencies in the game ecosystem for proof of work regarding X infinity and some T2E? there seem to be dangerous confusing gameplay with work, especially since one can invest in scholars in order to play. That's true. Nevertheless, useful economic development rather than just virtual portions, play to earn provides a new incentive mechanism for buyback. I completely agree with what you're saying here right now. This is an absolute revolution. And I think we're just scratching the surface here. If you look at the gameplay of Axie Infinity, it is not the best out there if you compare it to games like Fortnite and all those games, or super immersive games that we are seeing nowadays. But I think their point was just to prove that you can, if you think from first principles, and if you think that the actual problem, how to actually involve more users to play your games, probably it's not all about making good games or creating the best gameplay out there. What you need to do is think from the ground up, think for what other incentive mechanism, exactly what you have written, need to provide. And then once you have that foundation, once you have a strong template again for how to make P2E earn games, or how you can innovate in that space, you can spend more time on the immersive games and like work more on game designs and all those things. I think right now, blockchain, the entire thing that people care about is raising your voice, hurting of the community, and just creating what you want. But yeah, again, great question for sure. How does Coal and other blockchain tech developers develop profit? Is it like other tech companies buying or selling user data, or is it how it's impacted movements on Asia? Great question. And I'll be totally honest, when I joined Covalent and found out how they actually make money, I was astounded. So the way it works is that, as I already told you, the API is free to use. Devs don't have to pay to use API on a monthly or bi-weekly basis. So the way we get the data, so the way we make money is that when we index a blockchain, they actually pay us, because we have such a huge ecosystem of devs with us. The way a blockchain becomes successful is that more and more dApps are deployed on their system, on their ecosystem, on their blockchain. And getting those first 10, 20, 30, 40,000 dApps on a blockchain is where Covalent provides some value. Because for us, as I already showed you in the API, if you want to move from Ethereum to Polygon, all you need to do is change that one number, 1 to 137, something like that. And it just creates such an easy access to move the developer traffic from one blockchain to other, that they see a value in this. They see a value in paying us to provide the money. So we don't sell any data. And the thing is that if you're making a transaction on blockchains, the data is public. So there is no privacy at that point. User data about you, like we don't have your PII for sure. We don't have like how you look, what's your age, what is gender from your MetaMask. That's just not possible. Right now, I think in the future it will be, as we start doing KYC and all those sort of things. So we'll have some kind of information available on blockchain in the future, which you can opt for, I assume. But we don't have any kind of PII that belongs to people. We only have the transaction history, the kind of movement they do on blockchains, and that is it. And Covalent is not a publicly traded company, as far as I know, but we do have a token. But no investment advice. Curious, where is Covalent in the ecosystem, layer 1 or layer 2? What's the role of Covalent playing in the ecosystem? Are you going to have your own blockchain on the layer 1, or just build layer 2 solutions? Great question. So Covalent, so our network will live on Moonbeam. It's one of the blockchain. So we are not layer 1 for sure, because layer 1 is Moonbeam. So we are somewhere on the layer 2. But again, we are not providing any scaling solution to the blockchain. So layer 2 is also some kind of blockchains. But they actually are like a feeding system to layer 1s. They provide their data to the layer 1s. They actually are as a solution to scale the layer 1s. We are on top of layer 2. which is like the dApp ecosystem, where the applications are made. So Covalent actually provides you the data of those dApps. So we are more like Uniswap than Polygon or Zcash. So we are more in that part of the stack. We will not have our own blockchain, but we'll have our own system of nodes. Actually, we do have our own internal blockchains, but it's not creating any transactions by you interacting on it. It's more like read transactions. So it's kind of weird and it's kind of different. But if you're like really interested in knowing that where exactly how we are operating and where to actually fit, we're going to release a official white paper very soon, and you can take a look into it. I can, if you want, just send me an email. I can share it to you sometime if you want. Yeah, you kind of say that layer 3. There's like no keyword as we know today as layer 3. We just call it the application layer. But yeah, layer 3 would be a way to say that too. Why not?
Okay, so I see that our cluster lead, Professor Victoria Lemieux, has joined us. So over to you, Vicky.
Yeah, thank you, Chang, and thank you, Nadi. I'm sorry I couldn't join at the beginning. I was dealing with a little bit of an emergency, but it is fantastic to come back, and I caught most of your presentation, I think, for you to come back and share all your knowledge and experience that you've gained since graduating from the blockchain graduate pathway and UBC. And it's astounding to me how much knowledge you have of this space now and what you're doing and building with Covalent. It was definitely our goal to prepare you and the other students to participate in this emerging industry and all the the ecosystem in the DeFi space and in the blockchain space. And I can see that you are making us proud in how you are going forth and actually building the future of this technology and this space, and really thoughtful responses to the questions as well. So many unanswered questions, I'm sure, that we'd love to talk with you more about, but thank you again for coming to share all your knowledge, and congratulations on all that you're doing right now. And as you and I have discussed, and we've discussed with other members of the Covalent team, we are looking for ways for UBC to collaborate and leverage the amazing capabilities that you built at Covalent and you continue to build. And so we will continue those discussions and stay tuned for how we can leverage this unique capability. But I'm sure that those who participated in this session now will have a much clearer idea of all of the possibilities there are for collaborating with you and with Covalent. So thanks again for joining us and sharing your knowledge today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you, everyone again. Really thoroughly enjoyed. I think these are all a bunch of brilliant minds here, and they know the ins and out of the industry. They know how to actually use the data the best part. The only thing that we can do as a Covalent is provide that. Just a closing statement that I'm putting in the chat, the API docs, where you can find all the endpoints. So in case, if you're stuck on something, you're planning of a way how to get the data and like write papers and like do all those kind of research for this thing, it just make things easier for you, because I know for a fact, when I was struggling to find the data of blockchain for my own research, I wish I knew about this thing. So yeah, just a small help there, if that can work out for you guys.
That's wonderful. Well, we really appreciate it, and I'm sure the students will really appreciate this in terms of the research that they're doing. And yeah, so thanks again, Anadi. And yeah, we look forward to having you back again to give us some more insights as this project evolves. So, and if you have questions for Anadi, you can, I think, have you left your email for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah.
So we'll, please feel free to get in touch directly with Anadi. The recording of the session will be available online through Blockchain at UBC. Again, if you want to rewatch it, I'm sure there's a lot of rich information there that you want to delve into a little further. So thank you everyone for joining us. It's great that you were active and engaged participants as well in this session, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. In the meantime, we hope you enjoy the festive season, stay healthy, and enjoy a little bit of a holiday, we hope. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Anadi.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.